This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include, we welcome for the first time, recently retired Leah Daughtry, representative from Johnston County, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former Secretary of State and former Attorney General Rufus Edmisten. Well, as we begin this new year, we'll talk about new court challenges, the new administration, and upcoming legislative session. Plus, as always, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Should be a good one. Let's get started. We begin 2017 much as we ended 2016, with legal battles headlining the news. The special session of the legislature passed two pieces of legislation that immediately drew challenges, notably HB 17, that among other things takes authority away from the State Board of Education, giving it to the new superintendent, as well as SB 4, that involves the remaking of the state and local boards of elections. In both instances, challenges to the new law sought and obtained temporary restraining orders, preventing their implementation. John Hood, let's begin with the education part. Without question, the constitutionality of the legislative action is taking authority away from the state board, giving it to the superintendent. It's going to take months to resolve. But what's going to happen in the meantime? Is the state board going to continue to function as it has? Will the new superintendent act as if he has the expanded authority, or are we going to be somewhere in no man's land here?
Well, I should say from the beginning that as we speak, we don't know the fate of those restraining orders. But I think that the State Board of Education will probably act fairly similarly to the way it has. I don't think that there'll be some big showdown about the budget or about a hire. I think that there'll be a kind of a wary distance or a kind of a working relationship with flashes of tension between the new state superintendent, Mark Johnson, and the State Board of Education. Remember, the State Board of Education turns over gradually. It's not like a lot of other agencies where the new governor comes in, it's Roy Cooper, he's a Democrat, he takes over for a Republican, so everybody's changed out. That's not the way the State Board of Education will work. And I think that it will take a while to get this case resolved. It is the case that the plaintiffs have the strongest argument for.
Chris, they had their first State Board of Education meeting this past week, and I understand it was kind of tense around there.
Well, it was, and it was also, Mark Johnson's new to Raleigh, so not only is he having a fight with the State Board of Education, a fight that, by the way, I don't think he requested. I think the General Assembly sort of gave him this additional power, so he's been sort of in the middle of the controversy. I think it's important to remind people, though, who are watching, this is not a Democrat versus Republican battle. The State Board of Education is controlled by Republicans. The chairman is Bill Kobe, a former state Republican Party chair. So this is a former congressman. And a former congressman. I do think that we are likely to see this case resolved sooner rather than later, and I expect that they will operate as usual until that happens.
Yeah, Rufus, Chief Justice Martin formed two three-judge panels to hear this case, removing from them Judge Donald Stevens in Wake County. Both met this past week to determine whether or not to continue to stay. But one way or the other, these cases are going to require some time before the panels of judges get briefed enough to actually conduct these hearings. The three-judge panels are required because the legislature decided that in constitutional issues, they would prefer this rather than a single judge or having to go directly to the appellate court. Is this the right way to approach these constitutional issues?
Well, I'm not sure it was a bad idea to do a three-judge court. I wasn't all bothered about that. But what I've been thinking about, Tom, is that we've had a sea change of court activity in the past 3 or 4 years that we never had in the history of North Carolina. Courts are now virtually running North Carolina with the rulings they do. It's sort of like the Congress of the United States of America. They rely on courts all the time. And the three-judge courts are a sound idea because they're composed of Superior Court judges that seem to know what they're doing. I'm not opposed to that, and I just wish there was some expedited way to get these things settled because it's not fair to anybody.
It's going to continue on for a long time. Leo, I'm reading now from the state constitution, Article 9, Section 2, which says the State Board of Education shall supervise and administer the free public school system and the educational funds provided for its support, except the funds mentioned in Section 7 of this article, and shall make all needed rules and regulations in relation thereto, subject to laws enacted by the General Assembly. Is that the clause that the legislators depended on in passing these changes to the state board?
That is correct. And I want to mention the three-judge panel. One of the disadvantages of having the three-judge panel is they are to listen to and decide constitutional issues. Good defense lawyers now are bringing up a constitutional question in almost every case, which means that that case goes on and on and on to finally the plaintiff in frustration is ready to settle rather than go back to the three-judge panel and come back. I think that the three-judge panel does work, but it is very cumbersome.
Well, this case, both these cases for that matter, but particularly the case with the State Board of Education is going to take months, maybe even as long as a year or so to be resolved. The big question in my mind is, in the meantime, what happens to the Department of Public Instruction? What happens to local school systems? What happens to the State Board of Education, to Mark Johnson, and even the relationship with the legislature? John?
Well, I think that it's challenging for all sides, but some of the key issues that are unresolved as long as the case sits are things like who controls the office that regulates charter schools.
Right.
Is it the state board?
Right.
Is it the superintendent? There's some staff questions that have to do with the superintendent's authority. But keep in mind the state board unambiguously maintains the power to govern the schools, the rules and regulations affecting public schools. The legislature didn't strip that from them. That is going to continue. The nature of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction Office is unclear, but let's be frank about it. That office has been problematic and screwy for decades.
We've had governance questions about.
Absolutely.
I mean, ever since the 18 years we've been doing this show, we've raised governance questions.
This is the wrong way to go about it.
Well, okay. So are we in the same situation on the boards of elections lawsuit, Chris?
Well, we are. Judge Stevens ruled that this whole new entity with ethics and the Board of Elections he put a hold on that, a temporary restraining order. So now we're going to have a three-judge panel look at that. This one directly is more about partisan politics. It's about the governor. It is Democrats against Republicans, and I think both of these cases, it may take 6 months or a year, are both going to end up in the North Carolina Supreme Court.
The difference, though, with that case, Tom, is that that's not a constitutional entity.
Right.
It's not like the State
Less
Board of
of a
Education.
constitutional issue.
It's controlled it was created by legislators. It's a statutory agency, and so I think unless they can make some kind of separation of powers argument, it seems hard.
That is the argument.
I understand, but it seems harder for that one to prevail.
All right. So last week, in the middle of the week, we got another ruling from the three-judge panel that ruled that the legislature had to draw new legislative districts by March 15th and new elections by summer or fall of this coming year. Leo, you were part of the legislature that passed these laws. They're now on appeal. But this three-judge panel is holding their ground here. They're not going to stay this mandate for redistricting.
That's correct, and I think it's going to make a lot of difference in how the legislature operates in the long session. If they think there's going to be elections in the fall, the leadership won't be willing to put too much on their plate for fear that it will affect the outcomes of the election. It would be a dampening feeling about how to run the General Assembly.
I had not thought about that, but it certainly makes good sense.
And also, if there's a primary in the spring or summer, this will be the first time there'll be a primary at the end in a long session. I wonder if the long session will be shorter.
Any other court challenges that are going to be coming up in the next few months? I know we still have election law challenges.
If Governor Cooper follows through on his bizarre notion that he can expand Medicaid contrary to state law, that will be another court case.
Yeah, all right. We'll talk about that later in the show.
All right.
We thank you for watching NC Spin on the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. When we come back, we're going to talk about that new administration.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We're welcome back to NC Spin. We're going to talk about the new administration. Roy Cooper wasted no time in getting sworn into office, taking the oath shortly after midnight on January 1st instead of during the actual inauguration. Attorney General Josh Stein and State Treasurer Dale Falwell quickly followed suit on January 1st. Rufus, these actions broke with the normal tradition of assuming office. Why did Cooper insist on taking the oath on January 1st instead of waiting a few more days until the inauguration?
Well, I'm not going to say because he could.
I told you not to.
No wonder. Why wouldn't he? That's my whole question, because before he was even thought he was in the clear, he was being sued all over the place, powers taken away, and he got further and further behind worrying about lawsuits, having to defend the prerogatives of the governor under separation of powers.
Well, there's no question about the fact that he was delayed in forming the cabinet.
Yeah, he needed that time, and I don't blame him at all. And I think he's done a real good job of having interim directors in all these departments, because they're sworn state employees right now.
Chris, this was sort of unusual that the legislature decided during one of their special sessions in December that cabinet secretaries were going to have to be confirmed by the Senate. Didn't say how, didn't say what process or anything else. It just said they had to be confirmed. Is this the first time in your memory this has happened?
It is the first time. The Constitution does allow it, but nobody has done it. And remember, we have had several times in the last 25 years a legislature and a governor of opposite parties, and nobody had thought this was the thing to do until the legislature came in to special session and the Senate wanted to do this. I think what you're raising is very important, which is when. We don't know. The General Assembly comes back next week. Are they going to take this up immediately? Are they going to drag it out? You know, the legislature a few years ago didn't appoint Governor Perdue's appointments to the State Board of Education. They made Governor McCrory wait a year and a half. So let's hope that they don't. Let's hope that they give the new governor the people he wants to run his agencies.
Well, Leo, the legislature said that they would they would, after coming back into session, they would formulate the process and the procedures of how they were going to do this. How rigorous do you think that's going to be?
I don't think it's going to be a problem. We have in the past had judges that we had to confirm, and we had a process to do that. It was not difficult. It went very well in the House. We got them over to the Senate very quickly. And I think the same thing will happen with Governor Cooper's appointments. The only problem is going to be if he chooses someone that the General Assembly does not like. That may take some time.
Already there's one of them that might cause a little bit of controversy. We're going to talk about these cabinet appointments in greater detail, by the way, next week. But certainly for the Department of Environmental Quality, there might be some...
It's worth saying, by the way, that while it is absolutely the case that the legislature has never acted in its authority to confirm cabinet secretaries, as Leo was just saying, there are other gubernatorial appointments that have always been subject to confirmation.
Commissioners.
And in fact, when Governor Jim Martin was in power and the Democrats controlled the legislature, they rejected, for example, his initial banking commissioner. They said no, so it has been done in the past.
Rufus, you've been involved in state government for a number of years. Let's talk about these acting cabinet secretaries or acting supervisors or whatever you want to call them that have spread all out through state government until people can be confirmed. How's that going to work? Are they going to be able to take charge of their agencies and actually run them?
Frankly, they already have. They've been sworn in as state employees. They got the benefits of state employees. Some of them are even riding around in state highway patrol cars. They have the full force and effect of a state employee. And I sort of might disagree a little bit with my friend Leo. The Senate is going to be the one confirming under the new law.
Yeah.
And if somebody's got a personal vendetta against somebody, you're going to have a lot of delays, in my opinion.
Well,
I don't think it's
does
going
it
to be
have to be
smooth
a
at all.
unanimous vote, or is it just
I assume it's a majority vote.
Yeah, majority
It's a
vote?
majority.
But the Republicans are going to have to sign off on
But
that.
we haven't heard that.
I think this is a very wise move on the part of Governor Cooper, because he can run his department the way he wants to with the people he's got in there.
There's one really odd thing that happened before the end of the year. DEQ Secretary, somebody mentioned that agency, Donald Vandervaart demoted himself to a level that a job that is now politically
But it was his former job.
It was his former job, but it's very unusual to have a former secretary who doesn't probably agree with the agenda of the new governor go back to a place where he has some power.
John, I want to talk about the fact Governor Cooper's just not wasting any time here. He appeared this past week before the State Bankers Association and the Chamber of Commerce at an economic forecast forum, outlined 3 big agenda items that he wanted to accomplish and wanted to accomplish them fairly quickly. I want to take them one by one. The first one is repeal of HB 2.
Well, yes, big surprise.
Well, and he's trying to enlist the business sector to help influence the legislature. How effective can that be?
The business sector would like this issue to be put to rest in some fashion. There's no question about it. Now, they're not wedded to any particular solution to it. They do want it resolved.
All right. The other one he said that he wanted to do was expand Medicaid. Leo, has he got the authority to be able to expand Medicaid? He's talking about applying to the federal government to be able to do. Does this have to be passed by the legislature?
I don't think he has the authority to do that, frankly. And I think because the Congress wants to abolish the Obamacare, it's a good idea at this point to wait and see what they do before much action is taken in respect to Medicaid. We may find we get a grant. We don't know what's going to happen. And the idea of, at this point, going out there and saying that, I think is just ruffling feathers.
President-elect Trump has pretty much said that it's going to end up being block grants.
Tom, I think this was a major strategic error on Roy Cooper's part. He spent a month, and his defenders spent a month, questioning Republicans' fealty to the rule of law and complaining about special actions and decisions made too quickly and evading the law. And this is very clearly in violation of a duly authorized state law. In fact, 2 different state laws that prohibit this. He has no authority to do this. The Obama administration doesn't have time to say yes properly to follow federal law. It ruins his entire months of PR against the Republicans.
One of his first tasks, Rufus, is going to be putting a budget together. He's got to take it over to the legislature sometime in March, traditionally. Usually these budgets from the governors just kind of get looked at and put on a shelf. Do you expect that's going to happen?
Well, there's one over there from Governor McCoy right now, too, as I understand it. Go back on John's HB 2. I noted at that meeting of the bankers and the Citizens for Business and Industry, Chamber of Commerce, the only time they gave an applause was when he said, I want to repeal HB 2. So you can see what John was talking about. There's some support there.
All right.
And he encouraged them to go back and talk to their legislators.
After these messages, we're going to come back and talk about the new legislative session that starts next week.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
The North Carolina General Assembly convenes for the 2017 session on next Wednesday, and we want our panel to look ahead to some of the items that are going to be on their agenda. Leo, we assume that House Speaker Tim Moore and Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger are going to continue as leaders in their respective chambers. What issue or issues do you think are going to be on the top of their agendas?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it depends upon when the election is going to be held. If it's an election that's going to be held later this year, then I don't think the agenda would be very
Well, they
broad.
won't know that, will they?
Well, they'll know it between now and April, I would guess.
Okay, all right.
So you obviously have the budget. That's going to be done. I think there'll be a great deal of interest for raising teachers' pay. There's a reg reform bill, and there's some appetite to see about election reform in respect to the photo ID. Those are some of the issues that could be brought up. There may be others, but they're certainly at the top of the list.
The reg reform was sort of a holdover from last year's session that they just ran out of time and never got a chance to
That's
get done.
right.
In the education area, I would say, in addition to what Leo just said about teacher pay, I think there's going to be an interest in principals, discussions about bonuses or incentive pay and higher pay in general for school principals. And I also think there'll be some discussion about changing the funding formula for public schools. Now, this could be a very difficult legislative morass to get through, but it's an issue that has come to the fore that lots of people are talking about, changing the way we fund the public schools.
Certificate of need might be one that might come up. There might be some action finally taken on easing or any more tax reforms?
Tom, I think from a bipartisan point of view that we're going to see efforts to do away with that outrage of trying juveniles as adults.
Finally raising the age.
That's an outrage. It should be cut out.
Chris, the problem with that, and I think you're right, is how much money does it take? It takes about $70 million. And I have never been able to get that much money out of the General Assembly. They think that's a lot of money to spend on that particular issue.
It does kind of
many
mount up.
other issues out there.
Chris, one of the things that was interesting to
70
me,
million.
I don't know whether you heard it or not, but there were rumors floating around Raleigh this past week that the Medicaid division might be transferred out of the Department of Health and Human Services and into the State Treasurer's Office. Did you hear that?
Well, we've heard that the Medicaid division might be, remember they talked about setting it up as an independent division, and I think that's one of those things that surfaced a little bit during the special session. There wasn't time. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it would be the wrong move. I do think we should talk, again, we talk about teacher pay and they deserve more money, as do principals, but state employees haven't gotten a very big raise in the last few years. I think you're going to hear a lot about that. I also think you're going to hear about more accountability in the school voucher program. There are other states that have voucher
and
systems
charters.
that have, well, but especially the voucher program, other states that put at least a few strings on there so we know the kids are getting a good education. I think Governor Cooper will talk about that.
Leo, you still got your ears pretty close to the ground over there. I'm hearing also rumors that there's bipartisan support for putting together a transportation bond program this next year.
There's no question about it, and I think that is a great idea to have a good-sized bond to build roads in our state. We're getting way behind, clearly way behind, and this is one way we can help.
Why didn't they put it last March on the ballot?
Well, we wanted to, but we couldn't talk the Senate into it.
Okay. How big do you think it'll be? $1 billion?
$1 billion.
$1 billion. Rufus, the big question mark is how well the Democratic governor and the Republican legislature are going to play together this coming year. You've had experiences with agencies across state government. What's given the recent interactions between them, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, there's going to be some fighting and scratching, and not sibling rivalry, but just rivalry. And I think that since both, I'm going to include Josh Stein on this too, I think they both, Roy Cooper and Josh Stein, have been in the legislature, and they understand a little bit better than a lot of folks that get to be governor that have never been in that position. I think you're going to see a lot of cat fights, but more cooperation than people expect.
You think we'll see the veto stamp?
Oh, that thing is going to be just inked up every day.
After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at OurNCHealthcare.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
One of your favorite parts of the show, and one of mine, is when we ask the panelists to tell us something we don't know. Rufus Edmisten, I'm going to start with you.
Well, Tom, we were talking about all these constitutional challenges, and I got to point out that in the beginning of our state, we were very leery of royal power. They were tyrannical governors. We've never had a balanced government here. There's not been a parity between the three branches of the government. And if our Constitution stays the way it is, it will always favor the legislature.
Interesting. And one of the weakest executive branches of any state in the
by
nation.
purpose. We were the last one to get the veto and the last one that could succeed themselves.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
I actually think one of the sleeper sessions I didn't get to mention, but is the A through F grading system in North Carolina's public schools. It really penalizes the way the formula's worked out schools that have low-income kids and improved quite a bit. The House included in their budget this past time a change to the formula. The Senate didn't take it up. I think there'll be a lot of pressure this year with the Achievement School District and everything else to have a much fairer formula on how we grade schools.
John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Whatever you think about the law that changes the way we govern elections in North Carolina, I was puzzled at all the assertions that this has never been done before. The last two times Republicans were elected governor in 72 and 84, and there were Democratic legislatures. And both times they prohibited the governor, the Republican administration, from controlling the election system. They didn't do it by changing the composition of the elections board. They simply forbade them from hiring anybody. So the Democrats always maintain control of elections during Republican administrations, always.
Interesting. Leo Daughtry, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, I'm from Johnson County. I'm very proud of my county. There are two industries that are expanding there. One's called Novo Nordisk, and they are going to build the largest building capital expenditure we've ever had in North Carolina. $1,800,000,000. Next, their neighbor is Grifols.
Yeah.
They're also expanding by the tune of $300 million. So Johnson County is an ideal place to live.
They may not have gotten the CSX hub, but they're expanding pretty much.
And I'm so sorry they didn't get that, but I'm glad it went to Nash County.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Next week, Brad Crone is going to be sitting in this chair while I'm away. So join us when we will have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.